The morning air was crisp as sunlight spilled across the parking lot of Westbrook High, bouncing off rows of student-filled cars and the freshly waxed windows of the school building. A sleek silver sedan pulled into spot 14. Out stepped a woman, late 20s, sharp navy blazer, crisp white blouse, hair pulled into a low bun that was all business and no nonsense. Her name was Ms. Adriana Silva, and this was her first day as an English teacher in a school that didn't know what was about to hit it. With a leather satchel slung over her shoulder and a calm resolve in her chest, she walked up the stone steps, the click of her heels steady, her expression unreadable. To most students walking by, she looked like just another fresh teacher trying to make an impression. They didn't know what the scars under her confidence meant. They didn't see the years of discipline behind her poised posture. And they had no idea about the black belt folded neatly in her apartment drawer, the result of 15 years of training, pain, and perseverance. Inside, the energy buzzed with Monday chaos. Students shouted greetings across lockers. Laughter echoed down the hallways, and a low rumble of sneakered feet filled the air. A few heads turned as Adriana passed. New teachers always got some attention, but no one paid her more than a moment's glance. No one except them. At the end of the corridor stood Tyler Briggs, towering in a varsity jacket, flanked by his two longtime friends, Marcus Reed and Dylan Fox. Tyler had sandy brown hair, a jaw carved like he knew it, and the kind of self-assurance that came from years of people letting him get away with anything. Marcus was built like a linebacker, loud, brash, always ready for confrontation. Dylan was a quiet one, but not the harmless kind. He watched, recorded, and weaponized every social detail with precision. Together, the trio had turned the senior hallway into their personal kingdom. Teachers avoided eye contact. Students walked faster when passing them. Rules didn't apply to them. They rewrote them, and now they were watching her. Room 108. Adriana entered with a calm breath, flicked on the lights, and took in the space that would become her territory. Desks in clusters, faded posters on the walls, a whiteboard scarred with marker residue. She moved with intention, placing a small potted fern on the windowsill, arranging novels by spine color, and pinning up quotes that spoke not just to the mind, but to the soul. The most courageous act is still to think for yourself. Aloud. Coco Chanel. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King Jr. She believed in those words, lived by them. The bell rang. Students filed in with the usual mixture of curiosity and boredom. Some smiled when she greeted them by name, having memorized the class roster beforehand. Others mumbled, eyes still glued to their phones. Then the door creaked, and silence seemed to roll in behind it. Tyler entered first, 6'2" of entitlement and swagger. He offered no greeting, just a smirk. Behind him came Marcus, chewing gum like he was daring someone to tell him not to, and Dylan, trailing with his arms crossed, already scanning for weaknesses. They headed to the back row without a word. Adriana clocked their dynamic instantly. The leader, the muscle, the brain. She didn't react, just smiled and began. Good morning, class. I'm Ms. Silva. I teach English, but more than that, I teach stories. How to understand them, how to write them, and how to find yourselves inside them. A few heads perked up. Others remained indifferent. And then, right on cue, sounds like therapy with extra homework, Tyler muttered. Laughter rippled. Not loud, but enough to signal his power. Adriana didn't flinch. She turned to the board, wrote, Unit 1, Voice and Power, and turned back. Exactly, she said, eyes meeting his. Stories are power. And everyone in this room has one. Even you, Tyler. The room stilled. Tyler blinked, thrown off just slightly. She moved on, but she knew. That moment had planted the seed. She hadn't challenged him. She'd acknowledged him, but on her terms. That was the beginning. By the time class ended, her calm voice had carried them through a preview of the year. Shakespeare, Baldwin Angelou, and contemporary slam poets. She'd assigned a reflective prompt. Write about a moment where you felt powerless, and what you wish you could have said or done. Most students groaned, but a few, the quiet ones, stayed after bell to ask questions. As Adriana erased the board, she heard laughter in the hallway. Tyler's voice. She's trying too hard. Bet she doesn't last a month. Marcus added, 2 weeks, tops. Dylan just chuckled. Adriana paused, letting the marker hang in the air for a moment. They had no idea. She turned off the lights and left the room, her footsteps soft but certain, because she hadn't come to Westbrook High to play defense. She came to rewrite the rules. The next morning, gray cloud hung low over Westbrook High, casting a dull light on the building's brick facade. Ms. Adriana Silva pulled into the staff parking lot earlier than most, as was her routine. She liked the quiet before the storm, the silence of the halls before the pulse of adolescent energy filled them. But that morning, silence felt different, like a warning rather than comfort. When she entered room 108 and approached her desk, she noticed something immediately. The drawers were sealed. She tugged the top one. Nothing. Tried the second, glued shut. Her gaze drifted to the back of the room, where no students had yet arrived. But she didn't need witnesses to know who was behind it. The boys, Tyler, Marcus, Dylan, had made their first real move. Instead of showing frustration, she pulled out a pen and wrote a quick note to the janitorial staff, placed it on the desk, and moved to her backup plan. She had a secondary supply drawer locked in the cabinet behind the whiteboard. She used it like nothing was wrong. Control. Always control. When students filtered in minutes later, the room was calm and orderly. She greeted them like any other day. But Tyler strolled in with a swagger that was just a bit more smug than usual. His eyes locked on hers for a moment, searching for cracks. She gave him nothing. "Good morning, Tyler," she said evenly. "Nice desk," he replied, grin twitching. "Thank you. I keep everything organized." Marcus let out a stifled laugh, but she ignored it. Instead, she dove into the day's lesson, exploring voice and intention in narrative writing. It was a lesson designed to coax stories out of even the most closed-off students. As they worked in groups, she circled the room offering guidance. But her eyes stayed sharp, and her mind was already one step ahead. By lunch, word had started to spread that something had happened in room 108. A few teachers stopped by to ask if she was okay. She smiled politely and deflected. "No big deal," she said. "Just kids being kids." But it wasn't just kids. It was targeted, strategic, and it was escalating. The next few days confirmed it. A fake Instagram account appeared under her name. Low effort at first, goofy captions, grainy photos. But it gained followers fast. Students snickered when she passed by. She reported it quietly, had it taken down, and documented everything. Then came the rumors. Whispers about why she'd really moved to Westbrook. Lies about her personal life. Suggestions that she'd been fired from her last job. She knew exactly where it was coming from and exactly how much damage it was meant to cause. But Adriana had lived through far worse than social media pranks. Back in her small apartment that night, she sat on the floor stretching her legs across a training mat she kept beside her bookshelf. Her black belt rested on a wooden frame above her couch, not as decoration, but as a reminder. She breathed in, deep and slow, centering herself like Master Lee had taught her years ago. You cannot fight chaos with chaos. You move through it, redirect it. At school, her patience held. Her responses stayed firm, respectful, but clear. When Tyler whispered snide comments during open discussion, she answered with layered questions that forced him into silence. When Marcus accidentally knocked over a stack of graded essays, she calmly handed him a broom and made him clean it up while the rest of the class watched in stunned quiet. When Dylan turned in a plagiarized analysis, she returned it with a soft note. "Redo this by Friday. I believe you're capable of better." What they didn't understand was that she wasn't avoiding conflict. She was containing it, each reaction measured, each boundary unshaken. And slowly, the class began to shift. Not all at once, but subtly. A girl named Layla, who rarely spoke, stayed after class to ask if Adriana had any book recommendations for poetry. A boy named Devin, tough on the outside, always fidgeting, started handing in essays on time. Even a few seniors from other classes poked their heads into room 108 just to say hi. But Adriana wasn't naive. She could feel the storm building. One afternoon, a sophomore named Mia lingered at her desk after everyone else had left. "Miss Silva," she said in a low voice, "you should be careful." Adriana looked up. "About what?" Mia hesitated. "Tyler doesn't like being embarrassed. Nobody stood up to him before. I think he's planning something." Adriana nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mia. That was very brave of you to tell me." Mia blushed and looked down. "He scares people, but not you." Adriana smiled gently. "He shouldn't scare you either. But I understand." Later that evening, Adriana opened a new folder on her personal laptop. Documentation, Tyler Briggs. She filled it with notes, dates, incidents, screenshots. And then she called a friend from her old Taekwondo network, a lawyer, just in case. Because she wasn't just a teacher. She was a strategist. And she wasn't here to win a battle. She was here to change the game. By the third week, the hallways of Westbrook High had shifted. Not on the surface. Students still shuffled to class with their earbuds in, lockers still slammed, gossip still flowed like electricity. But beneath the daily noise, something had changed. The energy around room 108 had become different, more alert, more watchful. Miss Silva noticed it immediately. When she passed students in the hall, their eyes followed her, not with ridicule, but curiosity. Some looked like they wanted to say something. Others just moved quickly out of her way. In the classroom, her quiet authority was taking root, and those who wanted to learn were starting to lean in. Even kids who'd never raised their hands before were beginning to participate. Literature had become a mirror for many of them, especially in Adriana's hands. But not for everyone. Tyler, Marcus, and Dylan remained a constant wall in the back of the room. The snickers hadn't stopped. The whispered comments still came. But now, they were quieter, more calculated. She could feel them adjusting their approach, like predators circling prey they hadn't yet figured out. The real test came during a class discussion on Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Adriana had posed a question to class. When is it hardest to stand up for what's right? Hands rose. Ideas flowed. And then Tyler, without lifting his hand, dropped his book loudly on the desk. "This is so stupid," he muttered. Adriana didn't flinch. "Is there something you'd like to contribute, Tyler?" He shrugged, slouched in his seat. "Just saying, nobody cares about some old dead author and a fake story about fairness. That's not how the world works." Some students laughed nervously. Adriana held his gaze. "So you believe justice doesn't matter?" "I believe people pretend to care until it costs them something," he replied, louder this time. The air in the room tightened. She nodded slowly. "That's an interesting perspective. Do you think someone standing up, even when it's hard, changes anything?" "Yeah," he said. "It gets them hurt. Or fired." A few students turned their heads. Even Dylan looked up from his doodles. Adriana walked to the front of the room. "Let's open our notebooks," she said calmly. "I'd like you to write about a time when you saw someone do the right thing, even when it wasn't easy, and how that made you feel." Silence. Then, slowly, pen began to move. Tyler didn't write. He just stared at her, and she stared back. The challenge was there now, undeniable. Later that day, Principal Harris stopped by room 108. "I've heard whispers," he said, rubbing his neck. "Tyler's dad is a big name in this district. Just wanted to remind you to keep things smooth." Adriana offered a tight smile. "Smooth is subjective, Principal Harris. But I always keep things respectful." He gave a vague nod and left. Message delivered. She'd been warned. The real escalation happened 3 days later. Maria, a quiet junior who'd found her voice through a personal essay about immigration, stood at the front of the class presenting a creative project. It was powerful, honest, emotional, raw. Students leaned in, listening with unusual attentiveness, until Tyler spoke. "This is boring," he said, rising to his feet. "Nobody wants to hear a sob story." Maria froze. Her voice caught. Adriana moved quickly, stepping forward. "Sit down, Tyler." He didn't. Instead, he smirked and took a step closer. "Gonna do one of your moves again, teacher?" he mocked. "Maybe show us your black belt or whatever?" Marcus stood too. Then Dylan. They formed a loose triangle, circling her, as if this were a street brawl and not a classroom. Phones came out. Whispers filled the room. Some students gasped. Some pressed record. Adriana's stance shifted, barely noticeable but practiced. Her center of gravity dropped. Her eyes sharpened. "Return to your seats," she said, calm as ever. "Now." Marcus cracked his knuckles. "Maybe someone needs to teach you a lesson about respect." She didn't flinch. When Tyler reached out to shove her shoulder, it happened in a blink. Adriana stepped aside, redirected his momentum with a wrist pivot. Nothing violent, nothing flashy, just control. Tyler stumbled, hitting the side of a desk. Marcus lunged. She sidestepped, rotated, and used his own weight to steer him into the whiteboard. Magnetic words flew. Dylan tried to grab her arm. She dropped low, swept out of reach, and he found himself grappling empty air. 10 seconds. 3 boys disarmed. No punches. No injuries. Only silence. Then Tyler roared, "That's assault. You can't touch students." Adriana straightened her blazer, adjusted her sleeve, and said coolly, "I use minimum force to prevent aggressive behavior and protect my classroom. And every angle of this incident is recorded, both on the school cameras and on your classmates' phones." Dylan's eyes darted to the ceiling camera. Marcus froze. Tyler's breath heaved. "That's not over," Tyler hissed. "You're finished." She looked him square in the eye. "No, Tyler. What's over is your reign of intimidation." A girl in the back, Jessica, stood. "I have proof," she said, holding up her phone, "about what they did to Mr. Langston last year." Another student, Devin, raised his hand with screenshots and the fake account. More phones rose. The room wasn't afraid anymore. Adriana watched the shift unfold, not just in posture or noise, but in energy. Power had changed hands. Tyler backed away. "You'll regret this." "I don't think I will," she replied. The next morning, Westbrook High buzzed like a shaken hive. By second period, the incident in room 108 was no longer a rumor. It was legend. Students replayed videos under desks, watched reuploads on TikTok, swapped theories in bathroom stalls, and whispered in the halls. The story shifted with every telling. Some said Ms. Silva had flipped Tyler onto a desk like in the movies. Others claimed she was ex-military. A few insisted she was secretly a spy. The truth was even more dangerous. She was calm, prepared, and absolutely unshakable. By mid-morning, Principal Harris summoned her to the front office. She walked through the hallways like she always did, graceful, even paced, not a single movement wasted. Students parted as she passed. Teachers nodded with something close to respect. But when she entered the office, the air turned thick. Sitting beside the principal was Richard Briggs, Tyler's father. Powerful, wealthy, infamous for shielding his son from accountability, like a bulldozer with a lawyer on speed dial. He stood as she entered, looking her over with thinly veiled disgust. "This is the woman who assaulted my son," he snapped. "She's half his size." Adriana remained standing, meeting his gaze with calm professionalism. "Mr. Briggs, if we're discussing yesterday's incident, I have full documentation, video footage, eyewitness reports, and my own notes." "She attacked him," he spat, "in front of the entire class. She should be fired immediately." Adriana sat slowly, placing a folder on the desk. "Your son attempted to intimidate and physically confront me in the middle of a class. I used offensive redirection techniques to de-escalate without harm. And as you'll see, the school's own surveillance footage confirms that." Principal Harris opened the folder, sweat dotting his brow. "There are also screenshots," she added, "from other students, including text messages and group chats implicating Tyler, Marcus, and Dylan in repeated harassment of me and several other students, past and present." Richard's face darkened. "You think you can take down my son with screenshots?" "No," she said evenly. "I think your son took himself down with his actions." There was a long silence. Then Harris, trying to steady his voice, said, "Ms. Silva will be reviewing all the material. In the meantime, perhaps we allow tempers to cool before escalating this legally." Adriana turned to Richard. If your concern is truly for your son's future, Mr. Briggs, I suggest you help him take responsibility. He has a choice right now: repair the damage or deepen it. Richard didn't reply, just clenched his jaw and stormed out. As the door clicked shut, Principal Harris leaned forward, exhausted. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. Adriana's voice remained steady. No, I stood still. The hornets stirred themselves. Later that day, the school took its first official action. Tyler, Marcus, and Dylan were suspended for 2 weeks, required to complete 100 hours of community service, ordered to attend anger management counseling. Word spread fast. For the first time in years, Westbrook High students saw something they hadn't believed possible: consequences. Room 108 became a sanctuary. Students stayed after class. Some came just to sit quietly. Others brought questions, not just about literature, but about life. Jessica, the once timid girl who had stood up during the confrontation, started joining Adriana for lunch. Devin, whose grades had suffered under constant pressure, asked for help with college essays. Maria, still shaken from Tyler's attack, came every afternoon just to feel safe. And Adriana gave them her time, her presence, her quiet strength. But the threats didn't end. Anonymous emails, nasty DMs, a fake news article circulating among students titled "Violent Teacher Causes Chaos at Westbrook." She documented everything, quietly, meticulously. What the bullies didn't understand was that she didn't fear the storm. She had trained inside it. One evening, after all the students had gone home, Adriana rolled out a mat on the classroom floor. She practiced her form slowly, deliberately, moves designed for discipline, not destruction. Her movements were smooth, silent, deadly in their precision. As she moved into a final stance, she caught a reflection in the darkened window. Calm, steady, whole. The next day, something new happened. A sophomore named Eli, who'd rarely spoken in class, raised his hand. "Ms. Silva," he asked, voice cracking slightly, "can you teach us like self-defense? Just basics. Not like fighting, but like not freezing when something happens." The room fell still. She smiled. "Only if we agree that strength isn't just physical. It's about awareness, discipline, courage." Hands went up, lots of them. And just like that, her classroom evolved. It was still about literature. But now, it was also about resilience. Westbrook High entered a strange new rhythm. With Tyler and his crew suspended, the school breathed easier. Hallways quieter, classrooms calmer, tensions eased. It was like a pressure valve had been released. But beneath the calm, everyone knew it was temporary. A calm before something. In room 108, the change was immediate and profound. Class discussions flourished. Adriana introduced lessons connecting literature to real-life challenges, parallels between Atticus Finch and modern moral courage, between poetry and personal trauma, between fiction and the fears students carried in silence. She didn't shy away from tough topics. Instead, she invited them in. Her classroom became more than a space for analysis. It became a refuge. Jessica, once too scared to raise her hand, started leading small group discussions. Devin turned an essay so personal and raw that Adriana had to pause before grading it. Maria, whose voice had once trembled, spoke with steady conviction about the immigrant journey in The Namesake, her own experiences layered into every word. And then there was Emma. She entered room 108 quietly one afternoon, long after the final bell. Her eyes were red, her phone clutched tightly in both hands. Adriana looked up. "Emma, you okay?" The girl sat down slowly, like the weight of her body was too much. "Someone share my pictures. Private ones. From when I was with my ex. I trusted him." Her voice cracked. "Now the whole school's seen them. I can't come back here." Adriana didn't ask who did it. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "it'll be okay." She handed Emma a tissue and sat beside her. "You are not to blame," she said, softly but firmly. "You trusted someone who betrayed you. The shame belongs to them, not you." Emma cried. Adriana stayed. Over the next few days, Adriana worked behind the scenes, meeting with the school counselor, IT staff, and even law enforcement. She documented every share, every student involved. She kept Emma looped in at every step, never pushing, never speaking for her, only with her. And then she did something even bolder. She asked Emma to write. At first, the girl resisted. I'm not a writer. I'm broken. But Adriana insisted. Your voice is the only one that can tell your truth. Take it back. What Emma produced became a turning point. A deeply personal essay about consent, trust, betrayal, and healing. It didn't just circulate among students. It was published in the school paper, then reposted by local outlets. It sparked conversations that administrators could no longer ignore. In response, Adriana partnered with a counselor to launch a series of workshops, Digital Boundaries and Emotional Intelligence. Speakers came in survivors, parents, legal experts. Students listened. Some wept. Some confessed. Some finally understood the damage that cruelty could cause when masked as a joke or dismissed as normal. Meanwhile, Adriana's self-defense club grew. First 5 students, then a dozen, then standing room only. But it wasn't just about blocks and counters. It was posture, eye contact, voice projection. It was the art of not being a target. You speak with your body before you speak with your mouth, she told them one afternoon. So stand like you believe you matter. It wasn't a quote from a textbook. It was something she'd learned in a gritty Chicago gym after nearly being pulled into a van when she was 17 and had used her training to escape. And though she didn't tell the whole story to her students, they heard the truth behind her voice. She wasn't just teaching English. She was teaching survival. Tyler returned a week later, not with fireworks, but with silence. He entered room 108 quietly, sat in the back, and didn't look at anyone. His friends Marcus and Dylan returned too, each more subdued than the last. Adriana noticed immediately. The posture, the caution, the way Tyler's eyes darted but never challenged. Something had changed. Not broken, just cracked open. She didn't confront them. She simply continued the lesson. But at the end of class, Tyler lingered, waited until the room was empty, then stepped forward. He started, but the words faltered. His fists clenched. I need to talk to you. Not as a student. Adriana set her notebook down. Then speak like someone who wants to be heard. He nodded, took a deep breath. My counselor said I should apologize. But not just say it. Do something. He handed her a piece of paper. It was a list, names, dates, actions. Students he'd bullied. Pranks. Harassment. I want to fix this. I want to start something. Like anti-bullying or whatever. If I still have a voice here. Adriana looked at him for a long time. This isn't about erasing what you've done, she said. It's about owning it, loudly, and accepting that not everyone will forgive you. But it's a start. He nodded again. I get that. As he left the room, she let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The boy who had tried to humiliate her was beginning to unlearn what power meant, and that, more than any strike or block, was a victory. Weeks passed. The seasons shifted. The air turned crisper, and there came a subtle but powerful transformation in the hallways of Westbrook High. What had once been a school ruled by fear was slowly becoming something new. Not perfect, not healed, but different. Room 108 had become the heart of it. Inside those 4 walls, Ms. Silva continued teaching literature, but her students now understood it was never just about the books. It was about the subtext, the courage in Atticus Finch's quiet conviction, the endurance in Maya Angelou's rhythm, the fire in Audre Lorde's defiance. These weren't distant characters anymore. They were blueprints for real life. Adriana wove in writing exercises that made students confront their own fears, hopes, and mistakes. A project on personal narratives unearthed stories, so raw that even the most jaded students were moved. Jessica wrote about years of humiliation and how she'd finally found her voice. Devin's piece explored the pressure of being the man in a house where no father existed. Maria's poem, written entirely in her native Spanish and translated line by line into English, brought her classmates to tears. Tyler's contribution? A speech. Delivered in front of a packed gymnasium during a student assembly, it was his first public act of accountability. I used to think power was about fear, he began, eyes down, voice cracking. that if people were afraid of you, you never had to be afraid yourself. He paused, swallowed hard. But fear isolates you, makes you small, makes you hate yourself. I did things, said things I can't take back. But I'm trying now to be the kind of person I needed when I was younger. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of my cruelty, I'm sorry. You didn't deserve it. The gym was silent. No applause. Just silence. Thick with something heavier than judgment. It was truth. Afterward, Adriana found him alone near the bleachers. He looked up with a weak smile. That was hard. She nodded. Good. It should be. His anti-bullying campaign began small. Posters, a mentorship program, a weekly lunchtime group. But it grew. Students joined, shared stories. Even teachers began opening up during staff meetings about their struggles with discipline, control, burnout. Adriana didn't claim to have the answers. She just offered the same steady presence she had since day one. Meanwhile, her self-defense club exploded in popularity. What began with half a dozen students practicing posture and breathing had grown into a cross-grade, co-ed community that met twice a week. They learned wrist breaks, defensive pivots, verbal de-escalation, boundary setting. One afternoon, she addressed the group, hand behind her back, eyes scanning the room. I want you all to remember something, she said. You don't train to fight. You train so you don't have to. They nodded. But if the moment ever comes, you'll know you can stand. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. That phrase stuck. It appeared in notebooks, doodled on lockers, and eventually became the club's unofficial motto. Stand, even if your voice shakes. New issues emerged, though. Cruelty didn't disappear. It evolved. A group of junior girls started using social media to isolate classmates, posting anonymous confessions that mocked weight, outfits, sexuality. Emma, still recovering from her own ordeal, brought it to Adriana. They're not touching anyone, she said, but it's worse somehow. No fingerprints. Adriana didn't lecture. She assembled a plan. The following week, she launched a new workshop, Digital Shadows, the real world of online harm. It featured a former victim of doxing, a parent who had lost a daughter to cyberbullying-induced suicide, a psychologist who broke down the science of online shame. It was raw, uncomfortable, but necessary, and it changed things. More students came forward. More began using their platforms to defend, not destroy. Jessica's art class started a project, creating murals about online empathy. Tyler's team captains created a locker watch program to counter isolation. Even Marcus, still rough around the edges, wrote a short story for English class about a fighter learning to use his fists to protect instead of punish. Adriana marked it with a small note. There's more under the surface, Marcus. Keep digging. He stayed after class to ask what she meant. You don't have to carry your pain alone, she said simply. He nodded, didn't say anything, but she noticed he didn't lash out for the rest of the week. Dylan found his niche in the debate team, shifting from silent enabler to methodical speaker. His logic was sharp, his tactics precise, but he'd learned the difference between persuasion and manipulation. One Friday, he approached Adriana with a binder. I've been thinking, he said. We always wait until things break to fix them. What if we taught kids this stuff before it gets bad? He was proposing a freshman orientation module on power dynamics, conflict resolution, and mental health. She smiled. Build it. I'll help. Westbrook High wasn't perfect. Some parents still complained about radical classroom content. Some students still slipped through the cracks. Not every bully changed. Not every victim healed overnight. But something powerful was happening. It wasn't just one teacher making waves anymore. It was a ripple effect, stretching from room 108 to every hallway, locker, and lunch table. Not a revolution, a reformation. And it all began the day a teacher refused to be broken. As winter gave way to spring, Westbrook High stood in contrast to the icy wind outside. The energy in its halls wasn't just different. It was alive. Something had taken root. Courage, curiosity, conversations that once seemed impossible. And at the heart of it all whether they realized it or not, was Ms. Adriana Silva. Her classroom walls, once blank and sterile, were now layered with student work. Poems, essays, speeches, collages, quotes scribbled in color marker. The air buzzed with thought. Even the students who once slouched with arms crossed now sat forward, pens moving, brows furrowed with honest effort. The school district had noticed. One morning, a sealed envelope appeared in her faculty mailbox. Nominee for New Teacher of the Year, Westbrook Unified School District. Adriana stared at it in silence, not for the title, but for what it meant, that her efforts were becoming undeniable, that the system, slow as it was, had turned its eyes toward her classroom and couldn't look away. Still, with recognition came resistance. The superintendent's office began receiving complaints from a handful of influential parents, including Richard Briggs. They questioned her methods, claimed her workshops were ideological, accused her of overstepping boundaries. One parent accused her of traumatizing her child by discussing topics like bullying and consent. Adriana was called into yet another meeting, this time with the district's academic board. "You've built a strong following," one member said, flipping through a report. "But some feel your classroom has become more of a counseling space than a literature class." "I teach stories," Adriana replied, steady, "and stories reflect life. If students see their lives in the pages of Baldwin or Angelou or Shakespeare, why shouldn't we discuss it?" A pause. Another board member, older, more severe, leaned forward. "But you're teaching more than metaphors. You're teaching resistance." "I'm teaching students not to be victims," she said. "That's not resistance. That's survival." Back at school, Principal Harris stopped her in the hall. "I'm just going to say this plainly," he murmured. "You've shaken this place up in all the right ways. But don't expect the system to clap for it. Not yet." She nodded. She hadn't come for applause. She had come for impact. Her self-defense club now had over 40 students. She divided them into smaller groups, adding peer leaders like Jessica, Devin, and even Dylan to help coach newcomers. They didn't just practice martial techniques. They role-played difficult conversations, learned to recognize predatory behavior, developed scripts for de-escalation. Adriana knew the fights they'd face in life wouldn't always come with fists. One day, she invited a special guest to club, Master Sung, her old instructor from Chicago, now in his 60s. He moved slowly, his steps measured, but his presence radiated strength. "You think strength is loud," he told the students, "but true strength whispers." He demonstrated simple techniques, using breath, posture, stillness. Then he gestured to Adriana. "This one," he said, smiling faintly, "was the quietest student I ever had. Always scared, always small." Some students chuckled. Adriana did too. "But she stayed," he continued, "even when everyone else quit, even when she cried. She stayed. And that is strength." That afternoon, as the students filed out, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "You have become more than fighter. Adriana, you are torchbearer now. Do not let them blow it out." She nodded, her throat tight, and just in time, because another challenge loomed. A group of anonymous parents had filed a formal petition demanding she be removed from the district's Teacher of the Year list. They accused her of being divisive, indoctrinating, too emotional. The school board called for an investigation. But what they didn't anticipate was the tidal wave of support. Hundreds of letters poured in, from students, parents, even alumni. Jessica wrote, "She made me believe my voice mattered." Devin wrote, "Before Miss Silva, I hated books. Now I write stories of my own." Maria's letter, written in English and Spanish, read, "She made me feel seen." That's the first time that's happened in this country. And then came the most surprising letter of all, from Tyler. "My name is Tyler Briggs. I used to be the worst kind of student. I bullied. I lied. I did real damage to real people. Ms. Silva didn't just stop me. She taught me how to look at myself and not run. She didn't humiliate me. She held me accountable. And somehow, she believed I could change. She's not a danger to students. She's the reason I still am one." Adriana read that letter at her desk and sat in stillness for a long time. Then she folded it, placed it in the top drawer beside her black belt certificate, and smiled. She hadn't broken the system, but she'd cracked it open. By the time the end of the school year loomed on the horizon, the halls of Westbrook High felt unrecognizable compared to where it had all started. And the change wasn't loud, it was lived, daily, in the conversations between students, in the way lockers slammed less violently, in how the quiet kids walk a little taller. And in room 108, the legacy was becoming something bigger than even Miss Silva had imagined. It wasn't about her anymore. The change had taken root in her students, and it was spreading. Jessica, once the favorite target of the school's bullies, was now leading a weekly peer support circle for students who had experienced harassment. She had partnered with a counseling office to establish protocols, created anonymous reporting forms, and even trained other students to become point allies, students designated as safe peers anyone could talk to. Maria, who used a tremble when she spoke, was now tutoring other immigrant students, helping them with both English and emotional adjustment. She'd been offered a full-ride scholarship to the University of Denver. Her college essay, titled Room 108, Where I Found My Voice. Devin, once on the brink of academic failure, had started a student book club, Lit and Legit, where fiction was connected to real life. His attendance went from silent obligation to animated discussions. One day, he even suggested adding a poetry slam to the school talent show, and it became the event of the semester. Even Marcus and Dylan had evolved. Marcus had begun writing short fiction under a pen name, pouring his aggression into characters who learned to protect instead of harm. He never showed anyone at first, but one day he left a story on Adriana's desk. The title? The Hands I Never Knew Could Heal. Dylan, always quiet and cunning, found his edge on the debate team, not as a manipulator, but as a tactician of truth. He began mentoring younger students in argument construction. When asked why, he said, "Because if I'd known how to make a point without hurting people, I would have done it a long time ago." Then there was Tyler. His anti-bullying initiative, once laughed off, had transformed into an official school program. Project Respect now included mentorships workshops and a weekly podcast where students shared their personal stories, both as victims and as reformed bullies. The tagline? Change starts with us. One episode featured Tyler himself. "I used to think being feared was the same as being respected," he said. "Turns out, respect can't be forced. It's earned, and it starts by facing the ugliest parts of yourself." The podcast had over 10,000 downloads within its first month. Adriana listened to it one evening while grading essays. She sat there, silent, letting the words settle into her bones. And then a letter arrived. The district board, following overwhelming testimony and documentation, had not only dismissed the complaints against her, they had unanimously voted her as the winner of New Teacher of the Year. She received the official plaque at a modest ceremony in the school auditorium, but the real moment came after. Tyler, flanked by his father, Richard Briggs, noticeably quieter and more grounded, approached her after the ceremony. Richard extended his hand. "I misjudged you," he said, voice strained but sincere. "I was wrong." Adriana shook his hand. Tyler stepped forward, holding an envelope. "I wanted you to have this." Inside was a printed version of the recommendation letter he'd submitted for her award. But more than that, it included a second page, his own handwritten note. "You didn't just change my behavior. You changed the way I saw people. And myself. I still mess up. I still get angry. But I don't hide behind it anymore. You gave me the tools to deal with it. You made me believe I could be someone better. Thank you." She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her notebook. She didn't cry, but her heart swelled so tightly it nearly knocked the breath out of her, because that, not the award, not the attention, was what she had fought for since day one. And yet, there were still new battles to face. Cyberbullying had evolved, now done through subtler means. Emojis instead of slurs, silence instead of insults, rumors hidden in vague captions. Adriana updated her workshops accordingly, bringing in new experts and developing resources specifically aimed at psychological microaggressions and passive abuse. A new group of students, the freshmen, entered the school carrying whispers of the past year's events like campfire stories. They peeked through her classroom door before first period. She's the one, right? The black belt teacher? I heard she took down 3 seniors in under 10 seconds. My cousin said she's like a real-life superhero. Adriana overheard one morning and simply smiled. In her first lesson that year, she addressed it directly. Some of you have heard stories, she said, standing before the new faces. Let me make something clear. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to teach. But if anyone in this room feels unsafe because of a rumor, a threat, or a silence that feels too loud, this is your place. This is where you learn that stories have power. And so do you. The room quieted. Then a student in the back raised his hand. Is it true you flipped a guy into a desk? She smirked. I redirected energy. Literature will teach you that's more effective than force. Laughter rippled across the room. Class began. The legacy was moving forward, not through fear, but through purpose. The school year neared its end, and Westbrook High glowed under spring sunlight. Trees lining the walkways burst with green. The air was warm with anticipation, and college banners hung over lockers like silent promises. The final weeks brought exams, goodbyes, and a quiet ache of something meaningful closing. But inside room 108, the energy was different. It wasn't an ending. It was a transition. Ms. Silva moved to the classroom with practiced ease, straightening a quote on the wall, handing out last-minute assignments, nodding at the seniors who'd stopped by not because they had to, but because they wanted to. The room was filled not with silence, but with memory. Each desk, each corner of the bulletin board, held echoes of voices that had once trembled and now spoke boldly. One afternoon, Adriana found herself alone. She sat at her desk, flipping through a box of letters her students had left her, notes scribbled on index cards, drawings, folded poems, thank you messages. Among them, she found one from Alex, a student she barely remembered, always sat quietly in the third row, turned in average work, never spoke unless called upon. Ms. Silva, you probably don't remember me much. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't talk, but I saw everything. I saw you stand up to Tyler. I saw other students start to feel safe. I saw Jessica speak up and Maria walk taller. And somehow that made me feel like maybe I could be brave, too. Thank you. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm just quiet. And that's different. Adriana sat back, heart heavy with a mix of pride and emotion. Change didn't always come with applause. Sometimes it came from a whisper. Graduation arrived. Caps tossed. Photos snapped. Families cheering from the bleachers. But it was the moments after the ceremony that lingered. Maria approached Adriana, diploma in hand, her voice shaking. You were the first person who made me feel like I belonged. Jessica hugged her fiercely. No words. Just years of silent pain finally released and replaced by purpose. Devin walked up in his new button-up shirt and said, I'm applying for an internship at a publishing house. Thought you should know. Marcus handed her a small booklet. His short stories. They're rough, but they're mine. Dylan shook her hand. I learned how to win arguments the right way. Because of you. And then Tyler came, in his gown and sash, holding an envelope. This is my acceptance letter, he said. Psychology major. Full scholarship. I want to help kids like me. Adriana blinked. That's incredible. He looked at her, then at the students around them. I'm going to be someone who sees through the anger, like you did. She nodded, tears threatening. Just don't forget what it felt like to be on the other side. I won't. As the crowd thinned, Adriana returned to room 108. She walked slowly, touching the doorframe as she entered. On the desk lay one final item, a hand-drawn card with a quote in the center. The strongest warriors are not those who fight, but those who protect. Signed by dozens of students. Inside, the Self-Defense Club had left her a new black belt, stitched with her name in gold thread. That summer, she trained, traveled, taught a course at a community center, rewrote curriculum to include even more integration between literature and life. When the new school year arrived, the whisper started again, new students with wide eyes and stories of the teacher who once flipped a senior, echoing in the cafeteria. Adriana met her new class with the same calm she always carried. "I'm Ms. Silva. I teach English. But more than that, I teach you how to find your voice and use it." A student raised their hand. "Is it true you made bullies cry?" She smiled gently. "No," she said. "I helped them listen." And in room 108, the story continued. Every year, new voices, new struggles, new beginnings. But the mission remained unchanged: to stand, to speak, to protect, to teach not just literature, but life. The girl who once needed Taekwondo to survive had become the woman who taught others how to thrive. And her greatest weapon wasn't her strength. It was her belief that everyone, no matter how broken, could choose to become something better.